Imagine you're a parent, right? It's, I don't know, a Tuesday evening.
Just a totally normal weeknight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your 14-year-old just got home from soccer practice, or maybe basketball, or maybe they were just running around the neighborhood with
They're
friends.
tired, they're sweaty.
Right. And they drop their bag by the door and they complain about a throbbing ache in their shin.
Yeah, which happens all the time.
All the time. So what do? I mean, you grab an ice pack from the freezer.
You tell them to elevate it.
Yeah, you tell them to take it easy for a few days. You do exactly what millions of parents do every single day, completely intuitively.
Because it's just logical.
Right. But what if that completely normal, everyday ache, that totally predictable outcome of an active childhood, is actually, well, a masterclass in biological camouflage?
Wow. Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
It really is. And when you tune into a deep dive like this, I know exactly what you are looking for. You are insanely curious.
You want those profound aha moments.
Exactly. You want the moments that completely shift your perspective. But you want to get there without drowning in a sea of, like, dense medical jargon.
Nobody wants to read a textbook right now.
No, exactly. You are looking for a shortcut to being comprehensively well-informed. And today, we're exploring a profoundly heavy, yet, I think, deeply inspiring intersection.
It really is inspiring, despite the subject matter.
Yeah. We're looking at the reality of primary bone cancer, the immense psychological gravity of the yellow awareness ribbon, and how the very architecture of grief is being radically transformed.
Transformed into proactive public health advocacy.
Yes. Through modern memorial networks like the Funeral Program site, we're going to look at how a localized moment of mourning can actually be engineered to broadcast life-saving information. Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network Deep Dive.
I love that framing, because it requires a complete paradigm shift in how we view both biology and, well, memorialization itself.
Right, because we usually view those as totally separate things.
Completely. We typically view a funeral or a memorial as a strictly retrospective event.
Like looking back.
Exactly. It's a closed loop, looking backward at a life that has ended. But when we analyze how these awareness symbols are deployed within those spaces,
The yellow ribbons.
right, the yellow ribbons, when we see them there, we see a mechanism that makes the memorial perspective. It looks forward.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it transforms a moment of communal gathering into an active, urgent broadcast designed to protect the living.
Oh, wow.
I mean, a simple piece of yellow fabric or a carefully designed graphic on a memorial program, it stops being merely decorative. It becomes a vital node in an information network.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really grasp the sheer power of that broadcast, we have to first understand the terrifying mechanics of the threat it's warning us about.
We have to look at the biology.
Right. We have to dive straight into the biology of bone cancer. And let's start with a foundational distinction that honestly completely changes the landscape of how we view this disease.
The primary versus secondary distinction.
Yes, because most of the time when we hear about bone cancer in the general lexicon, we are actually talking about secondary bone cancer.
Which is very common.
Yeah, but today, our focus is exclusively on primary bone cancer.
And that is a critical distinction, both biologically and, well, demographically.
So break that down for us. What is the difference?
So secondary bone cancer is metastatic. It's a cancer that originates in another organ.
Like the lungs or breast tissue.
Exactly. The lungs, the breast, the prostate. And then in its later stages, it sheds cells that travel through the bloodstream or lymphatic system and take up residence in the skeletal system.
So the bone is just the victim of an invasion from outside.
Precisely. It started somewhere else. Primary bone cancer, however, is a completely different mechanism entirely.
Right.
This is a malignancy that originates in the structural foundation of the body itself. We were talking about diseases like osteosarcoma and Ewing sarcoma.
Where it starts in the bone.
Yes,
Yeah.
the very cells tasked with building and maintaining the bone tissue suddenly go rogue.
And the demographic reality of that rogue behavior is what absolutely, like, stops you in your tracks.
It's devastating.
It is. Primary bone cancers overwhelmingly target children and young adults. They strike right in the middle of critical stages of growth and development.
And the biology actually dictates the tragedy here.
How so?
Well, think about what is happening in the skeletal system of a 12 or 15-year-old.
They're growing like weeds.
Exactly. Their bones are highly dynamic, hyperactive environments. They're going through massive growth spurts.
Right.
The osteoblasts, which are the cells responsible for forming new bone, they are working in absolute overdrive to lengthen the femurs, the tibias, the humerus.
Okay, so there's just a ton of cellular activity happening anyway.
Right. This This rapid cell division is a natural, necessary part of growing up. But cancer, at its core, is a disease of uncontrolled cell division.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. So osteosarcoma essentially hijacks the natural machinery of youth. It takes the very biological process designed to make a child stronger and taller and corrupts it into an aggressive, destructive force.
That is so insidious.
It really is. The disease is literally weaponizing the child's own growth spurt against them.
I mean, we rely on our bones to be our armor. They are the scaffolding of our entire existence.
The literal framework.
Exactly. To have that specific framework become the site of such a fast-moving, aggressive threat is a deeply unsettling concept.
It shakes you to the core.
But I want to explore a tension here regarding how this disease is classified, because it is universally described in the medical community as rare.
Statistically, yes.
Right. It accounts for a tiny fraction of all newly diagnosed cancers. Now, human nature dictates that when you hear the word rare, your brain instantly tries to comfort you.
You think it won't happen to you?
Yeah, you think, the odds are incredibly low. I don't need to panic. I don't need to prioritize this over more common concerns.
Which is a very normal human reaction.
Totally.
Hmm.
But why does the fact that it is a rare disease actually make it exponentially more dangerous?
What's fascinating here is how statistical rarity functions as a cloaking mechanism in the real world.
A cloaking mechanism. I like that.
Yeah, rarity creates a massive vulnerability in our standard expectations.
Okay.
In a diagnostic setting, rarity leads to an absolute lack of immediate suspicion.
Because nobody is looking for it.
Right. It's like a cybersecurity zero-day exploit.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Think about it. The body's immune system, the parents, the coaches, and even the pediatricians, they are all running standard antivirus software.
Yeah, they're looking for the usual suspect.
Exactly. They are scanning for common bug sprains, fractures, tendonitis, growing pains. But primary bone cancer is a completely novel code that sneaks right past the firewall.
Because nobody programmed the system to flag it early.
Yes. Because it is rare, the immediate diagnostic assumption always gravitates toward the mundane.
Right, because if you assume every single bruised shin is osteosarcoma, the entire medical system would just collapse under the weight of false alarms.
Precisely. You can't MRI every bumped knee.
You just can't.
So the rarity acts as a delay tactic, allowing the disease to progress entirely unchallenged, while everyone involved logically, rationally assumes it is just a routine, everyday issue.
Which brings us to the most agonizing reality of this entire subject.
The camouflage.
Yes, the disease doesn't just hide behind statistical rarity. It actively, perfectly mimics the everyday life of the young people it targets.
It really does.
Let's look closely at this camouflage of youth. We're talking about symptoms like persistent pain in the affected area, swelling, tenderness, and reduced mobility.
And we really have to look at the nuance of those symptoms.
Right, because it's not always obvious.
Not at all. The pain associated with primary bone cancer isn't necessarily a sudden, sharp, catastrophic break.
It's not like snapping a bone on the field.
Exactly. It is insidious. It is a persistent ache that deepens and worsens over time. Crucially, it is often more noticeable at night, or it flares up during and after physical activity. It might present as just a subtle swelling around the knee or the upper arm that just doesn't seem to recede.
And that is the cruelest irony imaginable.
Yeah.
Because those exact symptoms are the universal hallmarks of a healthy, active child growing up.
The overlap is essentially a perfect circle.
Wow.
I mean, a teenager plays a rough game of basketball, they get bumped, they dive for a loose ball, they come home with swelling, tenderness, and a localized ache.
Yeah, totally normal.
Or they are hitting a massive growth spurt, and the rapid expansion of the bone strains the surrounding tissue, causing what we colloquially call growing pains.
Right.
The pathological signal of a deadly tumor is completely drowned out by the ambient background noise of normal adolescence.
It makes me think of an alarm system going off in a house during a massive thunderstorm.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it.
You hear the rattling, you hear the noise, but you just logically attribute it to the thunder.
Because the thunder's right there.
Exactly. You don't even consider that an intruder is actively breaking in through the back window because the thunder is the most obvious, expected explanation.
And kids are constantly playing, falling, and growing.
Yes. Parents and educators naturally attribute these aches to the thunderstorm of youth. We ice it, we give them ibuprofen, we tell them to rest.
Which is the right thing to do for a normal injury.
But by doing the logical, caring thing, the actual dangerous signal remains entirely invisible until the tumor has expanded significantly.
Which perfectly illustrates why the threshold for suspicion has to be aggressively reprogrammed and why generalized awareness just isn't enough here.
Right, a billboard won't cut it.
Exactly. You have to educate the frontline observers, the parents, the school nurses, the physical education teachers, the pediatricians.
The people who see these kids every day.
Yes. The biological camouflage is so effective that these frontline individuals need to be taught to recognize the subtle, terrifying deviations from the norm.
So what are those deviations? What are we looking for?
It's about recognizing the pain that doesn't respond to rest.
Oh.
It's about noticing the ache that specifically wakes a child up from a dead sleep at 2 in the morning.
Oh, wow. Why at night?
Well, when inflammation pools at night and cortisol levels drop and there are no sensory distractions from the day, that tumor pain becomes undeniable.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The core message of any effective awareness campaign here is that persistent, worsening pain without a clear, resolvable cause demands proactive medical evaluation.
You can't just brush it off.
No. The assumption of safety has to be discarded sooner.
And when that assumption of safety is finally discarded, when a parent or a doctor finally looks at that swollen knee and says, wait, this isn't a sports injury, this isn't getting better, the camouflage drops.
That's the turning point.
Yeah. And the moment the camouflage drops, the patient and their entire family are thrown into an absolute crucible.
It's overwhelming.
Let's walk through what happens when that threshold is crossed, because the diagnostic process itself is just a harrowing journey.
It really is. Once the suspicion is raised, you enter a highly regimented, technologically intense diagnostic pathway.
Where do they start?
It usually starts with an X-ray, which is looking for the obvious, a disruption in the density of the cortical bone, the hard outer shell.
But an X-ray is pretty basic, right?
Exactly. An X-ray is a blunt instrument. It only shows you the shadows of the destruction. To understand the true scope of the invasion, you have to move to MRIs and CT scans.
How do those differ in what they're actually revealing to the oncologist? I mean, they sound similar to a layperson.
Yeah, that's a common misconception. A CT scan uses highly advanced X-ray technology to build a three-dimensional architectural model of the bone.
Okay, so a 3D model.
Right. It shows exactly how the tumor has eaten away at the structural integrity. But the MRI is where the true, terrifying scope of the disease is often revealed.
Why the MRI?
An MRI uses magnetic fields to align protons in the water molecules of the body. It is exceptional at looking at soft tissue and marrow.
Oh, I see.
The MRI shows the oncologist how far the tumor has crept inside the hollow cavity of the bone and whether it has burst through the periosteum, the membrane covering the bone, and invaded the surrounding muscles and blood vessels.
That is terrifying to even picture.
It is. And finally, you have the biopsy.
Right.
Taking a core sample of the tumor itself to look at the cells under a microscope. That is where the definitive, life-altering diagnosis is handed down.
And obtaining that diagnosis, confirming that this is osteosarcoma or Ewing sarcoma, is just the starting line of a grueling marathon.
Just the beginning.
Yeah. Treatment protocols involve intense chemotherapy to shrink the tumor and kill microscopic cells that may have already traveled to the lungs, combined with localized control. I mean, surgery or radiation.
And the surgery is often radical.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, profoundly devastating to contemplate. Curing the patient, physically removing the threat to save their life, often requires permanently, radically altering their physical body. We are talking about limb-sparing procedures, or in severe cases, amputation.
It adds a layer of complexity to the journey that is almost impossible to overstate.
It's unimaginable.
We have to look at what is happening in those sterile hospital conference rooms. You have a family sitting across from an orthopedic oncologist, and they're being asked to weigh survival statistics against their child's future mobility.
Their body image.
Yes, their body image, their entire way of interacting with the physical world.
How do you even begin to process that as a teenager? I mean, a 15-year-old's identity is so intrinsically tied to their physical self.
Everything revolves around it.
Right. Their ability to play a sport, to dance, to just walk down the hallway at school without feeling fundamentally othered.
It is a profound psychological trauma layered directly on top of a life-threatening biological crisis.
It's just too much.
Let's look at the mechanics of limb-sparing surgery. It sounds like the better option compared to amputation, but it is incredibly brutal.
What does it actually involve?
The surgeon has to remove the tumor with wide margins, meaning taking a significant amount of healthy bone and muscle around the tumor to ensure no microscopic cancer cells are left behind.
Wow.
They then have to reconstruct the limb, often using massive metallic endoprosthetics, essentially replacing the child's living bone with titanium rods and artificial joints.
That is major, major surgery.
It is, and for a growing child, these internal prosthetics may need to be surgically lengthened in the future to match the growth of their healthy limbs.
So it's not even just one surgery.
Exactly. The physical rehabilitation is grueling. The risk of infection is constant. So the choice between amputation and limb salvage isn't just a medical intervention. It is an impossible burden.
Yeah.
It is the agonizing calculation of what pieces of your physical self you are willing to sacrifice to buy more time on this earth.
It is an unimaginable weight. And for many families, despite the most heroic medical interventions, despite the chemotherapy and the complex surgeries, the disease wins.
It's a tragic reality.
It is. The aggressive nature of primary bone cancer means that mortality rates are still, a tragic reality. And this brings us to a critical pivot in our deep dive.
The aftermath.
Yes. What happens when the treatment fails? What happens to all that immense, overwhelming emotional energy, that trauma, and that newly acquired, hard-won medical knowledge?
Where does it all go?
Exactly. How does a family navigate the aftermath?
Yeah.
This brings us to the visual symbol of the fight and the incredibly unique sociological phenomenon we are seeing with platforms like the funeral program site. We are looking at the dual function of mourning.
This is where we see a fascinating adaptation in human behavior.
How so?
Traditionally, mourning is a localized internal process. A family grieves, a community offers condolences, and the focus is entirely on the loss.
That's very insular.
Very. But what we are observing now is the active repurposing of that grief. Families are utilizing platforms like the funeral program site to design printed memorial cards, funeral programs, and digital tributes. But they aren't just putting a beautiful photo of their child and a poem on these materials. They are embedding the yellow awareness ribbon directly into the design.
And by doing that, they are fundamentally altering the function of the memorial itself.
Absolutely.
Because when you hold a traditional funeral program, it's a marker of an ending. It's a quiet reflection. But the yellow ribbon symbolizes something entirely active.
It's a call to action.
Exactly. It symbolizes remembrance, absolutely. But it also symbolizes an ongoing fierce fight. By weaving that ribbon into the memorial, the family is essentially deputizing their own grief.
I love that word, deputizing.
Right. They're creating a lasting document that carries a broader urgent message of public health awareness.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the concept of a funeral channel network.
Break that down for us.
This is a broadcasting approach to mourning. Let's think about what a funeral program actually is from a purely informational standpoint. When a family uses the funeral program site to create a memorial card, they are generating an information node. That piece of heavy cardstock is going to be handed to 200, 300 people at a physical service.
That's a huge reach.
It is. And the digital version is going to be shared across social media networks, reaching thousands of extended contacts. The community network is highly mobilized and deeply emotionally engaged.
Because they care about the family.
Exactly. And right there, nestled next to the photo of the teenager who lost their life, is the yellow ribbon.
I want you, listening to this right now, to really visualize that scenario.
Put yourself in that room.
Yeah. Imagine you are sitting in a pew or standing at a memorial service. You are holding this beautifully designed, ductily personal program from the funeral program site.
You're feeling the weight of the moment.
You are feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of the loss of this young life. But as your eyes trace the design, you see that yellow ribbon.
It stands out.
It does. The program is subtly, powerfully educating you. It isn't just asking for your silent prayers or your condolences. It is implicitly asking you to be vigilant.
It's a warning.
Yes. It takes the tragic, hard-won knowledge the family just gained, the agonizing realization that a persistent ache in the knee shouldn't be ignored, and it forces you to engage with it.
You can't unsee it.
Right. It prompts you to go home, look at your own children, and lower your threshold for suspicion. It transforms you from a passive attendee into an active participant in an awareness campaign.
And we really have to consider the psychological empowerment this provides for the families left behind.
That's a huge piece of this.
It's massive. When a family is battling a rare aggressive disease like osteosarcoma, the defining emotion is absolute helplessness.
Because you can't control it.
The disease dictates the timeline, the doctors dictate the protocols, the biology dictates the outcome. The family has zero control.
Yeah.
But in the aftermath, by intentionally designing these awareness-driven memorial materials, the family reclaims a vital measure of agency.
They take some power back.
Exactly. They cannot change the biological outcome for their child, but they can actively weaponize their child's memory to protect others.
Wow.
They refuse to let the narrative end in victimization. They rewrite the ending into a narrative of enduring advocacy. The memorial program becomes a manifesto.
That is a staggering reframing of what it means to mourn. It's not just a schedule of speakers and a list of pallbearers. It is a literal warning system broadcast to the community.
It really is a broadcast network.
And the beauty of this concept is how seamlessly it scales. When we zoom out from the localized impact of a single memorial service, we see how this broadcast feeds into a massive societal ecosystem of action.
The ripple effect.
Exactly. We move from localized private grief into the broader realms of research, hope, and resilience.
And the sociology of this is brilliantly linear.
How so?
Well, we know that continued aggressive investment in medical research is the only way we are going to advance the technology, increase survival rates, and find less destructive ways to treat primary bone cancer.
Right, we need better treatments than amputation.
Absolutely. But that research requires massive amounts of capital, and capital does not flow toward the rare or the invisible without a catalyst.
It needs a push.
Exactly. That is where the multifaceted nature of the yellow ribbon comes into play. It is a symbol of remembrance and strength, but it is also an engine for visibility.
So what does this all mean in a practical, mechanical sense?
What do you mean?
Because I think it's very easy for people to become cynical about awareness. We see ribbons on everything.
Sure, compassion fatigue.
Exactly. We think, oh, it's just a piece of fabric. It's just a digital sticker on a Facebook post. How does that actually change the cellular biology of a tumor outcome?
That's a totally fair question.
I struggle with that leap from a printed program to an actual, tangible medical victory.
Yeah.
Walk me through that exact pipeline. How does the ribbon on the card translate to better lab equipment or a new chemotherapy protocol?
It is a perfect self-sustaining feedback loop, and it operates on two distinct tracks: the clinical track and the institutional track.
Okay, let's start with the clinical.
Let's look at the clinical track first. Visibility directly disrupts complacency.
Right.
When a community sees that yellow ribbon repeatedly on lapels, on digital tributes hosted by the funeral program site, on physical memorial cards, it elevates the cultural consciousness of the disease. It educates the front line.
Like we were talking about earlier with the parents and teachers.
Exactly. So 6 months down the line, a parent who attended that memorial service has a child who complains of a worsening ache in their leg.
And instead of icing it for a week.
Right. Because that parent was educated by the memorial, they don't wait 3 months to see if it gets better. They go to the doctor immediately. They demand an X-ray or an MRI.
Oh, wow.
That awareness directly reduces the delay in diagnosis. Earlier detection means the tumor is caught before it metastasizes to the lungs.
Which is huge.
It's everything. An unmetastasized tumor requires less brutal intervention and yields a significantly higher survival rate. The awareness literally altered the biological timeline of the disease.
That makes perfect sense on the individual level. I totally see that. But what about the macro level? How does it fund the research?
That is the institutional track.
Okay, tell me about that.
Communities that are educated and aware become inherently emotionally invested. They transform from passive bystanders into active advocates.
Right, they want to do something.
Exactly. A community that understands the devastation of bone cancer organizes 5K runs, they host fundraisers, they lobby their local representatives.
They make noise.
They make a ton of noise. They demand that massive philanthropic institutions and government health agencies allocate grant money specifically to this rare disease.
And that's where the money comes from.
Yes. That collective public pressure and localized fundraising aggregate into the massive capital required to fund clinical trials, to develop targeted immunotherapy drugs, and to engineer better limb-sparing titanium prosthetics.
It's a direct pipeline.
It is. The yellow ribbon generates the initial conversation. The conversation generates the public pressure and funding. The funding generates the medical technology. And the medical technology directly increases the survival rate.
It is amazing.
It is an extraordinary, undeniable sociological engine, all sparked by a simple Symbol of remembrance handed to someone in a moment of grief.
I can hear the absolute passion in your voice when you lay out the mechanics of that engine, and it is completely justified.
It just works so perfectly.
It maps out perfectly, and it completely validates the mission of platforms that facilitate this kind of networking.
Absolutely.
They are sitting at the very genesis of that feedback loop. They're providing the customizable tools to spark that initial, crucial conversation during a moment when a community is completely stripped of its usual distractions.
You have a captive audience.
You do.
There you go.
At a memorial, people are attentive. Their hearts are open. Their minds are engaged. It is the optimal moment to plant a seed of life-saving awareness.
Precisely. It binds the act of remembrance inextricably to the act of future prevention. You honor those who suffered by ensuring others do not have to walk the same agonizing path blindfolded.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to recap the incredible journey we've just taken, because the scope of what we've unpacked today is truly profound.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. We started by looking under the microscope at the stealthy, terrifying biology of primary bone cancer.
The mechanics of it.
Yeah, we explored how diseases like osteosarcoma hijack the dynamic growth of our youth, hiding their devastating presence behind the everyday, ambient camouflage of growing pains and typical sports injuries.
We walked through the harrowing crucible of the diagnostic reveal, and we confronted the unimaginable psychological weight of the treatment options.
The impossible choices.
Right. We acknowledged the impossible burden placed on families forced to choose between preserving a life and permanently, radically altering a young person's physical body through limb-sparing surgery or amputation.
But importantly, we didn't stop in the darkness of that hospital room.
No, we looked at what comes next.
Exactly. We followed the trajectory of that trauma and saw how the devastation is being actively, brilliantly repurposed.
It's the advocacy.
Yeah. We explored how the strategic use of the yellow ribbon, facilitated by networks like the Funeral Program site, transforms digital tributes and printed memorial cards from simple markers of an ending into vital, networked public health campaigns. We've seen how grief is weaponized to protect the living.
For you listening to this, the immediate practical takeaway is one of profound, educated vigilance.
Pay attention.
Exactly. It is a call for rigorous, critical thinking in your daily life. The next time you hear a child or a teenager complain of a pain that simply won't resolve, a pain that worsens at night, or refuses to respond to basic rest, I urge you to look past the obvious thunderstorm of youth.
Don't just dismiss it.
Question the assumption of a simple sports injury. Demand the scan.
And similarly, the next time you attend a memorial service or receive a beautifully designed program in your hands, take a moment to look deeper at the symbols being shared.
They mean something.
They are not merely decorative filler. They are carrying a desperate, loving, urgent message from a family that wants to protect you and your loved ones.
It's a gift, really.
It is. It completely changes how you look at the architecture of mourning. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as you step back into your day.
What's that?
We've seen exactly how a simple piece of yellow fabric printed on a funeral program can serve as a vital warning system that might, quite literally, save another child's life by prompting a crucial doctor's visit.
Right.
It makes you wonder, how else might we radically transform our traditional rituals of mourning into powerful networks of preservation for the living?
That is a fascinating question.
What other life-saving conversations, what other vital pieces of human knowledge are just waiting to be sparked by the symbols we leave behind when we say goodbye? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.